WP Speedfix. Back with another video. We are a site speed or WordPress site speed optimization and technical SEO agency, and we've optimized over 5,000 sites now in the last several years. So we know a thing or two about site speed, core web vitals, and specifically WordPress site speed. So in this video, we're going to talk about answer the question, why is my WordPress site so slow? A question we get asked about all day long. So let's get into it. We'll try and keep this short, not too technical, but it is a technical topic. So we are going to touch on a lot of technical things. To start off with, if you want a quick answer, go to our website, wpspeedfix.com. And if you go into the menu, you'll see here there's more free stuff. And if you go free site speed test, run your site through this test. So there's no opt-in required. So go there, test your site, takes about 90 seconds, and it will give you detailed reasons why your site is slow or your page is slow, and it will tell you how to fix it. So that's a very quick way to answer or solve the problem that you're looking to solve, I guess, by looking at this video. But let's get into the key reasons that we see. So we've seen thousands of sites, so all sorts of sites, big sites, small sites, enterprise, WooCommerce, membership sites, content sites, the whole lot. And these are the common reasons that come up again and again. Usually the people that ask these questions are not so technical, they're DIYers. So I'll kind of come at this with a kind of DIY approach. So let's talk about the first one. You've got slow or poor quality hosting that just is not appropriate for the size of your site, the traffic your site's getting, or it's just mismatched. And probably a good way to think about hosting quality is the price you pay for it. So the price of cheap hosting is the cost of a cup of coffee. It's $3, $5, $8 if you're in an expensive country and coffee's a lot. But basically, you're paying $3 or $5 a month for hosting. It's not going to be great quality, as opposed to the cost of a nice lunch, $30, $40, $50, $100 maybe. That's the price difference between good quality hosting and poor quality hosting. So it's not really much in the scheme of things. And we're talking about, I'm assuming that you have some sort of business hanging off the website. So, the difference between $5 a month and $50 a month isn't that much if you're selling stuff online. So keep that in mind that, if you've got poor quality hosting, the site is never really going to run that fast. A good way to test the quality of your hosting is to get uptime monitoring set up. So if you go to, we actually built an uptime monitoring tool because we've looked after so many customers and we set that up as part of our service. If you go to simpleuptime.co, we have an uptime monitoring tool there that's very cheap. It will monitor your site 24/7. It checks every minute to see if it's online. But basically, if the site is going down a lot, it's probably an indication that the quality of the hosting is not great, or there's some problem with the site that's probably related to hosting or the level of traffic on the site, or something related to quality there or configuration. So check that out, simpleuptime.co. The two hosts we typically recommend, Cloudways, Seaways.net, and WP Alpha, which is actually our own host that we built to solve these specific speed issues. So Seaways.net is very high performance. You get a lot of value. It's very technical, but you get a lot of power. For every dollar you spend, you get a lot of processing power. WP Alpha we built for small businesses that has a whole bunch of stuff around speed optimization built in, but also tools that help keep the site up and stable, security tools, patching tools, all that. So have a look at seaways.net and wpalpha.com. Those would be our two recommendations for hosting as a starting point. There's also some articles on our website. So if you go here on our site, DIY guides, you'll see fastest WordPress host there, where we have several other hosts we recommend. Okay, next one. No caching or caching plugins in place. So you may or may not be familiar with what caching is. So basically, what happens when a visitor hits a website without caching? WordPress has to go and execute a bunch of PHP code. So WordPress runs on the programming language PHP. It does a bunch of database lookups. Those lookups come back, more processing happens, and then the page is sent to the user. So that process can take anywhere from 1 to 5, even 10 seconds. So it can be quite slow. So what caching is, a caching plugin or a caching system, because it's not necessarily a plugin, it builds those pages in advance. So when the user comes to the website, the page is already built, ready to go, and it's just sent to them. So it avoids all those lookups and all that PHP processing. Some hosts have caching built in. Some have free caching plugins. There are a couple of caching plugins we typically recommend. One is Flying Press, flyingpress.net, and the other one is WP Rocket, so wprocketplugin.com. these are the websites here. So Flying Press, this one's a bit more technical. So if you are a technical person, that might be a better option. You can get a better result with Flying Press, but there's so much more in there as well, so many more settings. WP Rocket is built a bit more for the DIYer and is designed to be more simple, and you'll still get a fantastic result using it. But basically, without a caching plugin, every time a visitor comes to the website, all those lookups and all that processing needs to happen to produce the page, to produce the HTML, to send it to the user. So as I said, that could take anywhere from 1 to 5 to even 10 seconds. So without that caching in place, the site is just going to be slow. So you need to have caching. If you're not sure, ask your host, log a support ticket. Maybe your hosting has caching built in. Maybe it's turned off. Maybe you have a caching plugin and it's been disabled for whatever reason. But you need caching to make WordPress run fast. And those are the two, probably the most popular caching plugins on the web, and the two that we recommend and use all the time. So check that out. You need caching. That's, end of story. It's very simple. The next one, you don't have a content delivery network in place. You have a lot of traffic, or you are serving traffic worldwide or to several different countries. You need really a content delivery network on the modern web for things to go fast, or as fast as possible. So if you're not familiar, a content delivery network, or CDN, is a network of servers that sit in front of your hosting, and they're in various countries around the world, and they serve up part or even all of the website to users. So for example, if I'm in Australia accessing a site that's hosted in the US, if there's a content delivery network, most likely that site will be served to me off the servers in Australia. So it kind of eliminates to a degree the issues around geography. So anytime traffic has to travel across an ocean, that will typically be 1 second slower. So keep that in mind, even 2 seconds slower, depending on where that traffic is going to or coming from. And then also a CDN removes the workload from the hosting. So it moves the workload from the hosting onto the CDN server or servers. So you kind of get a couple of wins there. So you kind of eliminating geography, or the latency. The technical name is latency, related to geography and distance the traffic has to travel. And then also you're reducing the load on the hosting by offloading that to the content delivery network. So the CDN that we recommend is Cloudflare. So cloudflare.com, you'll see it there. And all these links will be in the description below. So this is Cloudflare. They do have a free plan, and the free plan is amazing. You can use that. We typically recommend using this service called APO. It's $5 a month. Dirt cheap for what it does. It used to only be available on their $200 a month plan. But basically, they cache a copy of your entire website, essentially. So the entire site loads off the CDN in normal scenarios. There are scenarios where that traffic will go back to the hosting. For example, if you have a WooCommerce site, as soon as somebody puts something in their cart, this system is bypassed and the traffic goes directly to the hosting. But basically, the APO service will move probably 90% of the workload off the hosting, which frees it up to do only the things the hosting can. So it makes WordPress significantly faster, and it's well worth the $5 a month. As I said, it used to only be available on the $200 a month plan. So for $5, it's a no-brainer. So check that out. Cloudflare is there's a bunch of other CDNs around on the web, but Cloudflare is probably the biggest CDN in the world. I think 10% of the world's internet traffic routes through Cloudflare, and it's what we recommend. And that APO service is not really available with any other provider, so that's why we recommend it. We've used it on thousands of sites now, never any problems. There are some other features in Cloudflare that we also use, so it's not just about CDN and speeding things up. It also has a firewall built in. So on our next point here, your site can be slow if it's getting hammered by malicious traffic or SEO crawlers or even Google. So depending on how your site's configured, you may have Google may be crawling things it shouldn't be, chewing up a bunch of resources, making everything slow. You might have something that's hammering the site, trying to brute force it, do things it shouldn't be. Or you might have SEO crawlers from tools like Ahrefs or SEMrush. Basically, the site's getting hammered that has a lot of load that isn't necessarily real traffic or real human users. So there's a few ways we deal with that. So we use a combination of Wordfence, so the Wordfence plugin. We use the free version. That's fine. There is a paid version. You don't really need it. But if you have a big site or security is a primary concern, it would be worth checking it out. But also Cloudflare. So we use custom Cloudflare firewall rules to deal with it. So we have this blog post on our website, 3 Cloudflare rules to improve security. You can check that out. I'll link you up to it in the description. But there's basically 2 key things we do here. There's 3 rules, but probably the biggest one is eliminating brute force attacks. So what we typically do is set up a firewall rule to protect the logon page for the WordPress backend and WooCommerce login page if you have WooCommerce. The typical WordPress site we see gets anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 brute force attacks a day. So that's a lot of load. So using this method, which is available on the free plan, so completely free, you effectively reduce that to zero. It blocks 99.9% of this stuff, and it's very simple. And it, depending on how you configure it, you can actually eliminate any inconvenience for real users as well. So you see there in the screenshot example there, we're filtering traffic outside Australia. We push them through a security message. You would have seen this yourself on the web where you go to a website and it says checking your security or checking your browser or something like that. So that's probably Cloudflare or a similar service running you through their firewall to check to make sure you're a real user. So that's taking care of brute force attacks. Wordfence can also do that, but it does use resources in the hosting. By doing it at the Cloudflare level or layer, we make Cloudflare do that workload instead of the hosting. So again, we're moving the workload off the hosting onto Cloudflare. I think that makes sense. Okay, and then we block SEO bots and crawlers. So there are some aggressive, or the big SEO tools are very aggressive. So you see them in the screenshot. I think you can see it there. SEMrush, Ahrefs, OpenSite Explorer, and Dotbot was another one. At the time we made this post, Dotbot was really aggressive, breaking a lot of sites we were seeing. But basically what this rule does is block those SEO crawlers. There's a secondary benefit there in that it stops competitors being able to use those tools to look at your site as well. But by blocking that traffic at Cloudflare, we basically get rid of it. So again, Cloudflare is just completely blocking it, not letting it through, and you remove the load on the hosting. So again, we're talking about removing load, stopping load, reducing the overall load on the hosting, so it is freed up to serve genuine users or serve you or your staff or whatever, whoever's using the site and getting a slow experience. Okay, the next one, no image compression. We've got huge pages. So if you've run your site through our tool here, it will check for the size of the page. But basically, we want the pages to be under 3 megabytes. That's kind of a cutoff for page size. Anything that's over 3 megabytes is going to fail Google's Core Web Vitals test, just because of the amount of stuff that needs to download. But if you've got, we often see sites that have a 10 meg, 20 meg, even 50 meg homepage or pages. When you have pages that big, it's just too much stuff to download. So it's too much for the connection, and it's actually too much for the browsers as well, particularly on a mobile device. The browser starts to crap out and it has a 50 megabyte homepage or page or whatever it is that that the browser's visiting. So we want to reduce the size of pages. Usually that's image related, not always. And there's two tools we use. They have WordPress plugins, and they also have some other options there, shortpixel.co and ewoptimizer.com. They're both very good. Shortpixel is probably better for the DIY. It's more simple and less technical. EW Optimizer is more technical. We use EW Optimizer just because we have a lot of sites and it's cheaper, and it has more options. But if you're DIYing, Shortpixel might be the better option, so check that out. Okay, simple one here. Again, if you've run your site through our speed test, it will tell you whether this is a problem. But you need to use HTTPS, so secure HTTP. Almost all sites have it today, built in, set up by default to use HTTPS. But your site also needs to support the HTTP2 protocol. So this protocol has been around since 2015 or so. And basically it speeds up how quickly stuff can download from your hosting, or how quickly a browser can download stuff from your hosting. Basically, without this protocol in place, the site will be 50% slower, or probably makes more sense if with this protocol in place, the site will load 2 or 3 times faster, just because stuff can be downloaded much faster. So basically, the difference between the version 1.1 of this protocol and version 2 is that in the previous version, so version 1.1, for every thing that had to download from the web server, so say you had 100 files to make your web page, the browser had to make 100 connections to the web server. So each one of these connections has overhead. So 100 connections is quite a lot. With this newer protocol, the browser just needs to make 1 connection and can download everything through that single connection. So it speeds things up substantially. And as I said, it's a 2 to 3x performance gain, depending on how heavy the pages are and how much stuff you have on a web page. So particularly pages with a lot more images will benefit more from this protocol, but it does make a huge difference to just that underlying network speed. There is also a HTTP 3 protocol, But the difference between version 2 and version 3 is not huge. You might get a 10, maybe 20% boost, but it's not like going from version 1.1 to version 2. If your host doesn't support this protocol, the quickest solution is to log a support ticket and ask them why. If they tell you they don't support it, it's probably a good indication that the hosting is not great and you should move elsewhere. The protocol is nearly 10 years old, so every host should support it. Sometimes there's a configuration problem, or it's not turned on, or something went wrong with the web server and it's not working, and that's a simple fix. But as I said, simple way to do it is just a simple way to fix it is to log a support ticket with a provider, ask them about it, and get them to solve the problem. Okay, the next one. Your database is not configured correctly, or if you're using WooCommerce, you're not using high performance auto storage. So we have this post on our website, how to speed up and optimize WordPress database queries. Probably the most important point here is point 6. Make sure you're using this newer database table format versus the older one. So the WordPress database can work in 2 different formats. There's an older one called MySum, a newer one called InnoDB. Basically, with the older format, when something's writing to the database, that database table is locked, so nothing else can write to it. So what happens is work queues up because only one thing can happen on that database table at a time. With a newer format, multiple writes can happen at a time. So only the row that's been written to in the database is locked. So it's kind of akin to an old Excel spreadsheet you would email around versus a Google Sheet where multiple people can access it at a time. Changing, particularly if you have an older site, you'll have this problem. And changing across, upgrading to the newer format is very simple. Basically, there's a plugin that will do it in one click. You need to make sure that your database is backed up first, because if it's not, you could run into trouble. It's a very safe upgrade, but you always want to back up before you do these sort of things. There's more details on this post. I won't go into it in too much depth here. And there's several other things you can do to speed up the database, but that would be the biggest one. If you're using WooCommerce, and we have a number of videos about WooCommerce performance specifically, you need to be using high performance auto storage. I won't go into it too much here. Just Google high performance auto storage, or look on our YouTube channel. There's other videos about speeding up the WooCommerce backend, cart, checkout, things like that. So check that out. Next one, using an old version of PHP. So again, WordPress runs on this programming language called PHP. If you're using an older version that's out of date, it will be slower than your site could be. So you want to be using the highest version of PHP that your site supports. Every version, every newer version is 10 to 20% faster than the old version. So version 8 is maybe 10 or 20% faster than 7.4. 8.1 is 10% faster. 8.2 is 10% faster again. You get my point. So you want to be using the highest version of PHP that your site supports. It's a bit more technical. If you're, it might be one for a developer. If you're not so technical, so if you're not so technical, you probably want a developer to handle that for you and not just go randomly changing the PHP version. Next one, you've got slower out-of-date plugins or errors happening under the bonnet. So there's this plugin called Query Monitor, and it will give you an insight into what's happening under the bonnet in WordPress. Here it is here. It's a free plugin. Super powerful. So basically, once you install it, you'll see this menu item appear in the admin bar at the top. There's some better screenshots down here. But basically, what it will do, you'll see here, there's some warnings and notices here. So if there's warnings, notices, or errors happening when the pages are loading under the bonnet, it will appear here, and then it enables you to trace the source of that. So it'll tell you if there's configuration problems with your WordPress site, if there's a plugin that is old or having some PHP error, it'll tell you. It basically enables you to trace errors and troubleshoot them. So very powerful. The most common issue we see is paid plugins that don't use the WordPress update system, that are just out of date. They haven't been updated in years. It's a simple case of, extending the license, buying the support, and updating the plugin, and the problem solved. But if there's configuration problems, WordPress is configured, there's something broken in a configuration file, it'll show up in this plugin. Super simple to use, very powerful. So I'll leave that at that. Next one, 404 errors. So if you have a 404 error, it's going to make the site behave erratically. It'll add delays into the loading, all sorts of weird lags. 404 errors make the site behave unpredictably and just add a lot of load to the hosting as well. So again, if you used our speed test tool, it'll show up. It'll highlight any 404 errors. where we see real problems is where there's a site-wide 404 error, where there's something in the footer or the header that is pointing to a file that doesn't exist. So every single page then has a 404 error. So the site starts behaving weirdly, bad for users, bad speed experience, and bad for SEO as well. So that's a pretty simple one to kind of troubleshoot and fix. If you don't use our tool, any sort of SEO audit or crawler will also dig in and troubleshoot those issues. So that's 404 errors, pretty simple, but it's a big problem in terms of speed and also SEO. Last one, third-party code slowing you down. So things like marketing code, analytics code, tracking code. So 3 simple steps here. Remove old code you're not using anymore. Just do an audit on the plugins you have installed, the code that you have installed, and remove anything that's not there anymore. Sometimes if you've been paying for a service and you still have the code in there and you're no longer paying for it, that code can cause problems. It can cause errors, slow things down. Any JavaScript you have on the site, you want to use defer, or you want to defer it, which is a form of optimization. Both these plugins have JavaScript optimization features built in. So I won't go into it too much detail here, but optimizing the JavaScript code will speed things up. And then for third-party code, again, analytics and marketing code, you ideally want to use Google Tag Manager and load it with this window loaded trigger. So inside Google Tag Manager, there's a bunch of different ways to trigger code. Basically, this window loaded trigger loads the code slightly later. So it won't load the code till the page has loaded. So it'll load the code 1 or 2 seconds later. That's okay. It avoids a scenario where the code is competing with the render of the page for resources and processing power. So it just moves that load later or that code processing later in the loading process, so the browser can focus on actually presenting the web page. Okay, that's it for this video. I'll leave it at that. We'll try not to get too technical and try not to make it too long. If you need help, like I said, just run this free WordPress speed test. There's no opt-in required. We're not tracking you to do anything weird. It takes about 90 seconds and it will give you detailed insights into what's going wrong and kind of give you a good list of things you can do and problems to solve. If you want help, you want someone to help you with it, you can request a free audit on our homepage. Shoot that through. One of their team will have a look at the site and come back to you with how we can help or what we can do. Otherwise, if you have any questions, just post in the comments and happy to come back to you. Cheers.